I know I've just pretty much filmed this video right afterwards. But anyways, so as you know previously, in the previous video, I started a 2010 Movie View Mentions Part 1. Here goes Part 2. So let's carry on. So the last one I mentioned was all about Steve. So here we go. Now this is more the February, whichever you say, month of movies for me, and leading into March. So here we go. The first movie on the list in this part, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Now this movie is directed by Chris Columbus, who, if you don't know, directed the first 2 Harry Potter films. And I have to say, it was pretty good. It was a very good movie for most of the premise. Basically though, the plot is this. Percy Jackson, played by Logan Lerman, is, a typical teenager having a typical life at school and whatnot. But one day but then he discovers that his father he's actually the son of the gods, and he's framed for stealing the lightning thief of the semi or demigods, whatever it's called. And so basically and then after trying to escape from the demigods, his mum gets captured and kidnapped. So after that, what happens is that he has to try and go and rescue his mother, whilst also recovering the lightning thief before the semi-demigods start a war on the innocent. So that's the premise of Percy Jackson. Now I have to say, this movie, like I said, this movie was very good. It was very good throughout most of it. It's definitely a typical fantasy movie. It didn't really excel on lots of boundaries exceedingly and extraordinarily, but it was an enjoyable experience at the movies, and I can only praise Chris Columbus for doing that. He certainly knows how to make a children's film. And I would say that this movie was brilliant all the way through, and it could have been fantastic, who knows. But it wasn't. The ending sucked. This is a spoiler, by the way, for Pete, what I'm going to say next. So if you haven't seen Percy Jackson, don't watch the rest of this video. Basically, the villain, I thought, got defeated way too easily. The fight was anticlimactic towards the end, and afterwards I'm thinking, oh, is that it? Come on, where's the proper fight? But either way, hey-ho. So far, 4 stars out of 5 for Percy Jackson. So next on this list is The Wolfman. Now this stars, please forgive me if I pronounce his name wrong, which I'm probably going to. I think it's Benicio del Toro, whatever his name is. He stars as Lawrence, who is this typical guy. I think it's a remake of a 1940s classic. But basically, long story short, gets bitten by a wolf, turns into a wolfman, causes havoc, people gotta stop him before it's too late. Yawn, stuff like that. This is just exactly the same thing as The Incredible Hulk. But surprisingly, this movie was actually entertaining. It was pretty good. And I will say that I think that, Ben DeToro and Emily Blunt do average performances, they don't do anything exceeding, they don't do anything extraordinarily. Emily Blunt, I'll be honest, Emily Blunt's performance I was a little bit impressed with, but she did look kind of hot as well. I think she stars in Wild Target, which comes out soon. For those of you who don't know, it's an action thriller comedy starring Bill Nighy, Rupert Grint, Emily Blunt, and Rupert Everett, I think, and Martin Freeman, whichever. Anyways, the movie itself was very good all the way through. Well, okay, the first half hour was very, very slow. It didn't go up quite to the speed that I wished it would. But nonetheless, it was a very good movie. It was a pretty good thriller, and the gory bits certainly define gory. Anthony Hopkins, I haven't really seen him in anything before. I know, tragic, but he did a very memorable performance as Lawrence's father. Hugo Weaving, for me, was the star of the show. He really was the show stealer. But unfortunately, he doesn't say, "Mr. Anderson, surprised to see me?" No. But so there's definitely no Matrix in The Wolfman. But I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. I thought it was a very good film, nonetheless. Next is The Princess and the Frog. Now, this movie, for me, I was a bit reluctant to see, because it did. While I admitted that I was thinking, well, it's an interesting fact that they've actually gone back to 2D animation now. I thought it was going to be very predictable, and I was partly right. I was somewhat right. The ending, I'll admit, was not predictable. I didn't expect what to happen at the end, although I did expect some of it. But I think that. But basically, it's just about this woman who has a dream. It's pretty much like Cinderella, except when you kiss the frog, instead of turning him into a prince, you get turned into a frog. I gotta say though, the movie was pretty funny though. It was pretty funny. So I would praise the filmmakers for that, and it's a good triumph for 2D animation, I think. But it's definitely not my cup of tea, because it's too of a kiddies film for me, personally. You know. But overall, 3.5 stars with Princess and the Frog, because I think it was a good movie. It was enjoyable, I'll admit that. And it's definitely not the worst I've seen this year. Oh, Steve! Sorry, I had a little bad of a throat. Anyways, moving on from that. Now, this is a movie that probably no one will have heard of, and it's called Ondine. I think that's it. Odine, Ondine, whatever it is. And it stars Colin Farrell. Now, I don't know who directed this, so I'm rubbish with film directors like this. But the plot itself is quite complicated. It's just basically, well, I'm contradicting myself again. Got to stop doing that. Okay, it's not too complicated. It's a bit strange though. Colin Farrell plays a fisherman who basically comes across a woman in the sea, literally fishes her up, and he basically learns about her true origins, whether she can stay or go. There's not much I can really say about this movie other than it was a bit strange in places, but nonetheless though, I still really enjoyed it. And it was certainly different from all those typical American films. No offence to Americans, I have to say. Anyway, so 4 stars out of 5 for Ondine. Next is The Lovely Bones. Now this is directed by Peter Jackson, who I mentioned earlier in part 1, did the amazingly epic Lord of the Rings trilogy. I love that film trilogy so much. And he also directed King Kong, which I thought was very good. You know, it still wasn't on par with what he did with The Lord of the Rings, but nonetheless, I really enjoyed that. Lovely Bones for me, still not as good as Lord of the Rings, but better than King Kong, I thought. That's at least for King Kong. For me, is probably Peter Jackson's weakest film to date, but this one I think had more emotion and heart into it, and it was really, although I will admit the character of Susie Salmon was extremely annoying, you know, and so I think they could have done with a bit less of her, you know. But overall, it's a very good movie, you know. I mean, there could have been maybe a bit more violence in it, I thought, but it's a book adaptation, so I suppose that's what to expect, you know, but I admire that Peter Jackson, even though I haven't read the Lord of the Rings books or The Lovely Bones, you know, I think I admire the way he sticks very true to the source material. That's all I can say for that, really. But the plot of that, I'm not even going to bother explaining the plot. You know, all it is just really one girl gets murdered and it shows what happens after her death and for her life and family's life. But anyway, so 4 stars out of 5 for The Lovely Bones. I definitely think it was a bit too long though. And it stopped to a sluggish thing in the middle, whatever. Anyway, moving on from that. Now the last film in this list, Alice in Wonderland. You're the wrong Alice! Bad impression. Don't know why I keep doing that. Weird. Anyway, Alice in Wonderland. Now this is the latest movie from Tim Burton. And of course he and Johnny Depp are on a very big collaborating success team, you know. Because they've done Edward Scissorhands, which I loved. Best work to date. The only other 2 I've seen are Charlie and Chocolate Factory, which was good. Original was better though. And Sweeney Todd. I haven't seen the original, but this Sweeney Todd was pretty good. And this is Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Now this movie, it basically follows Alice, who is now 19 years old, even though this could be somewhat of a sequel. And then she comes back to find out that the Red Queens took over the whole of Wonderland, and she meets the Mad Hatter, she certainly is mad, played by Johnny Depp. Red Queen played by Helena Bonham Carter, who I might add she should quit while she's ahead. Bad joke. But I praise the movie for itself because it visually looks stunning. The story itself was pretty well told, and the acting was very good actually. Mia Wasikowska, I haven't seen her in anything before, but after seeing this, I think she could prove herself to be a very good actress. Johnny Depp, same old Johnny Depp, but he still is brilliant as the Mad Hatter. Helena Bonham Carter was... I can't get over the fact she's got a big head. I can't get over that. But she was a very good in herself. And Anne Hathaway was the typical sort of gentle, loving white queen. Yawn. Anyway, but she was a good actress in herself. The only 2 things I didn't really like about this film was that, first of all, Mad Hatter was not as funny as I was hoping he would be. I think he was a bit too mad, but I wish he could have been a bit more comedic. And the last thing I'd like to say is that I think that the third act, or the ending, was very lackluster compared to the rest of the film. The first 2 had some somewhat of a creative elegance to it, whereas the ending kind of... bleh, typical ending. But I still really enjoyed this movie though, and I think it's Tim Burton's best film since Edward Scissorhands. So 4 stars out of 5 for Alice in Wonderland. So that's the end of part 2, even though it's probably gone on considerably longer than part 1. And until part 3 comes, I shall be signing off now.